What's going on, guys? Raymond Teacher in house, and we're back with the LGL post-draft power rankings. And by we, I'm not alone this time. This isn't my draft breakdown. I'm joined by the commissioner of the league, TheBigGoose. How you doing, man?
I'm doing lovely. How about you?
I am pretty much on form, and despite the fact it's 2:30 a.m. when I'm recording this. So, yep, that's called dedication. But just so that you know, as this is post-draft, we don't have the statistics to go on for actual power rankings. So we're going to be a little bit more subjective, but this is going to list of the criteria we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at Firewater Grass scores, as very common in any draft in general. Fairy Dragon Seal is not as good in this format. There's not that many fairies out there. However, Dark Fighting and Psychic type mons are very, very powerful in this format. So we're going to be looking at that as options as well. We're going to be looking at hazards and hazard removal. Obviously, hazards are very important to break those sturdy berry juice sets, and removal is a great way to prevent that from breaking. Decent pivots, U-turn and Volt Switch is always nice, because having the option to gain momentum definitely helps. And then physical special, if teams are too heavy on one side, it can be walled pretty easily by certain Pokemon. But that's what we're going to be looking for in these teams, and that's how we've ranked these teams. It's taken us a couple of hours to rank them, because we are a lot more subjective than we would normally be. Obviously, after this week, it'll be win-loss differential as your main tiebreakers, because that's basically how power rankings work after that. But with that being said, coming in at rank number 14 is going to be Zarin. Goose, why don't you take this one away?
Yeah, Zarin has a pretty strong Firewater Grass core with Darumaka, Staryu, and Rowlet. The issue is, and he has the Dark type, Psychic, and Fighting. The cores are pretty solid. The issues is his removal is really weak. He's got Rowlet can defog, and that's about it. He has a little bit of just a lot of weak mons down at the bottom tiers that don't provide any synergy for his team. Snom and Wimpod. I know it's tier 5, but there's still plenty you can do in tier 5. And he's a very physical leaning other than Staryu and Solosis. And it's just not a very synergistic team overall.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of holes here. Binacle sitting in tier 5, probably a better pick in my opinion than Wimpod. Obviously, yes, it's double water, but it does give you a Rock Setter plus a Shell Smasher. Definitely would be interested to see if that would have been a possibility. It didn't happen. There is no free agency in this draft, so it does make things a lot more difficult. These teams are practically locked in, except player-for-player trades now. It is worth bearing that in mind. But coming in at rank number 13 is the man who crucified his team for a tyrant. Thief Yi is here. Definitely a lot of shenanigans going on with the grace period after the draft. Thief was absolutely gutted that he didn't get his boy. He even has a Tyrant plush that he was very willing to show off in the Discord, which was pretty funny. It ended up being an hour-long, like 5-player trade deal for Thief to get his Tyrant, and I still think he lost out after the draft, despite all of this. I'm not a huge fan of his Firewater Grass. Sizzlipede, Horsey, Budju doesn't sound all that exciting, and then even if you put the Sphere in there, it doesn't sound any better either. The dual sidekicks in Abra and Woombats have very similar weaknesses. They're both very frail to Dark, which is definitely not a good thing, and they're both very, very frail in general, but they're decent offensive mons. Removal is a bit interesting on this team. There's only Woobat that gets defog, and it's not that good a defogger, I'm not gonna lie. Doesn't really have time to run it. So there's a lot of issues with this team. It's quite a big fighting weakness I'm just looking at here with Tyrant, Aron, Galarian Darumaka, Spheal. And that's pretty much all of them that are weak to fighting, which is a little bit weird. Mienfoo is very potent in this format, so that's definitely something I'm scared of for Thief. But Thief is a pretty fun guy. I think he's going to have a lot of fun matches, so I'm definitely excited to see what he tries to bring.
Totally.
Alright then. Coming in at number 12 is going to be Chronoculars. Why don't you take this one, Goose?
Yeah, Chronoculars, he took a lot of his elements from last season where he was not particularly successful. It was a smaller group, and I think he placed 7th overall. But he got really connected to a lot of his Pokemon. That's where the Croagunk pick comes in. his fire water grass is non-existent without a fire type to show for him, and grass type is Trico, which is not fantastic. His fighting dark psychic core is just Krogunk and Esper, but there isn't a dark type to show for. His removal is, I think, just Kabuto looking at it now, with Rapid Spin. And Duskull's just such a weak tier 3. There's so much power laced into tier 3. Having a Duskull filling a slot there feels really bad, which is really sad because I know you love Mudbray, Dratini.
And Magnemite as well. I've used those three quite a lot in Gen 7. I actually really enjoy all three of those ones. Just on this team, they kind of feel a little out of place, which is really unfortunate. They are very good mons individually, but as a team, synergistically, there's a lot of problems here. There's a lot of water type on this team with Mudkip, Lotad, and Kabuto. And they don't really bounce off each other all that well. There's not the hugest amount of value there. So it's all about value here. There is kind of a pseudo range strat. Magnemite does get Rain Dance, funny enough, so you can run like a sturdy Rain Dance set, which could provide options for Krogunk being a Dry Skin Mon, Kabuto, Lotad being Swift Swimmers, but it just feels so far-fetched. And it's one of those where we're reaching for synergies, and they're kind of suboptimal, and it kind of relies on a lot of setup, which, against some very strong teams, which there are some very strong teams in this league, I don't think he's going to have enough time to be able to pull this off.
Yep.
Alright then, coming in at number 11 is going to be Pradyush. I'm really not sure how to pronounce your name, dude. Please let us know, because I don't want to get it wrong. This draft, when I first saw it, on the face of it, actually looked pretty solid on the top end. Like, Diglett is a phenomenal trapper, great speed tier, is one of the fastest ones in the format. Natu is a very decent magic bouncer, pretty good hazard deterrent in general. And then I look down at the Meowth, which is actually very annoying. I've had many a bad issue with Meowths in Little Cup format. And Axew's a very solid dragon. But when I look at this team a little bit deeper, I see how physically offensive this team is, and his only real good special attacker doesn't really exist. Natu is pretty much the only dedicated special attacker here. Growlithe can run special sets, I guess, but it's kind of mediocre. But it just doesn't feel like there's enough special offense on this team to balance it out. I feel like it's very physically leaning, which means things like Ferroseed can kind of wall this team relatively easily once Growlithe is gone.
And as much as the tier is very much physically oriented, there is that Ferroseed, the Fungus, and there's too many physical, even Mudbray, there's too many physical walls. This isn't going to be able to punch through.
Yeah. For Mantis, probably Leaf Storm spam as good as it gets, but again, there is a Fungus and a Ferroseed in this format that just doesn't care. Alright. Coming in at number 10 is a team that's got slightly similar issues, Goose, but we are looking at Nougat Boy next.
Yeah, Nougat Boy is very much the same. You have Pawniard, super strong. Carvana, with the speed boost and the protect, can really get good sweep going, or at least remove some important threats. Cubone has Thick Club and can just pound its way through with that massive attack stat. Then you look at it, it doesn't have the special attackers it needs. It's got Litwick, which is fine. It's not great. He does have some really nice synergies with Grubbin plus Igglybuff plus Pawniard, even though Igglybuff is admittedly atrocious. All of those defog deterrents means he should be able to keep up his webs, or at least get some momentum out of them getting out. And Grubbin's one of the better, well, I say better, most of the sticky web setters don't really bring much to the table other than sticky webs, and Grubbin is not much more than a sticky web setter.
Yeah, pretty much.
And his
hashtag unpack Cutiefly. Alright, whatever. Yeah, that's just me being biased.
You can keep your B far away from me.
But yeah, speaking of, like, removal-wise, there isn't a lot on this team. Arkan gets Defog and Bergmite gets Spin, but I don't see too much else removal-wise on this team. So that's something else just to bear in mind. But his team can be pretty offensive. Pawniard with Defiant is kind of scary. Pressure's also annoying. Speed boosting Caravana could be a potential sweep, but that does require a lot of setup. Luckily, Bergmite is not the worst. It's not the best spinner in the world by virtue of the fact it's weak to rocks and it can't run heavy duty boots plus sturdy berry juice. So, like, there's a few little issues that Bergmite has to deal with. Is worth pointing out, he did actually offer Bergmite for a Lowland Sandshrew with me before, but I couldn't find a steal that I really wanted. So I couldn't make the trade happen. But yeah, that is a thing. But yeah, generally speaking, it's an alright team, but it's too physically leaning for me. And again, it struggles to get through a lot of the annoying physical walls in the format. Alright. Coming in at number 9 is the team that we both jumped straight towards immediately when we were looking at this, is J-Plane. So, J-Plane has one of my favorite mons in this format, which is Timber. Timber got a nice buff this gen, getting access to Defog, which makes this team a little different now. Unfortunately, the Synesty's not allowed to use Shell Smash. That's a ZU move only, so it's not allowed to use it, which does make it a little weaker. I was kind of hoping to grab Synesty off him for my rookie knee, but he wouldn't trade it, so unless he got my Hatana for one of his tier 5s, which were no good to me. So yeah, that was a thing. But as far as his team goes, it's relatively awkward looking. I do like the Glaring Ponyta though. Unfortunately, it's not a fairy type, it's only psychic, but it's still very strong in this format. Very, very fast Pokemon, much like its Cantonian form, as they have the same stats. But looking through it, Synesty is okay as a ghost in general, but it is very prone to knockoff, which a lot of ones in this format get, so that's a thing. He did pick up Slowpoke for Welmer, which is a massive upgrade. Welmer is a very weak water, in my opinion, in the tier 2 format. I think it's a better tier 3 in general. But Slowpoke is a very, very bulky mon. It's a good Abra check. It just sits in on Abra most of the time. So that's something to bear in mind. But yeah, against a lot of mons in this format, I feel like he could struggle. Vullaby definitely looks like it puts in a lot of work against this team.
Yeah, I picked up Vullaby, and I'm really excited that I did. I got it 13th pick somehow, and it's another. I don't see him punching through any threats, through any walls. Pardon me. He's got a lot of bulk there with the Slowpoke and the Lileep, and he should be able to stay in the fight for a long time. I just don't know if he has the offense to push through a win.
We shall have to see. But coming in at number 8, Goose, is going to be ODF. Go for it.
Yeah, ODF has a lot of mons that are really strong. He has Ferroseed, which is arguably the best wall, one of the best walls in the format. He has Spritzy, which is another really strong defensive mon, and Dupiter, which is probably the best sticky web setter because it does something other than setting up sticky webs. Other than that, he's got a lot of really weak stuff in there. Happiny and Nickit in tier 4 is not intriguing, and he's another one that lacks offense for the most part. I mean, Vulpix can deal some damage with Weather Ball, I guess, but Bulbasaur doesn't get Chlorophyll in Little Cup, because Chlorophyll got banned, thank Smogon. And the removal is, looking over it, it's basically non-existent, if I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, there isn't anything that immediately springs to mind. I can't see an immediate defogger there, unless somehow Dreepy gets it, but I doubt it. Stuff like that. So removal is a bit of a bind, which is one of the things. He's got good hazard setters, in the Dupiter Ferroseed especially. Swinub is a good rocker as well, but he doesn't really remove very well, so it could be a bit of a concern if it gets bounced back or if he gets stacked on, and stuff like that. Yes, Bulbasaur is a grounded poison type, so Toxic Spikes isn't a thing, but regular Spikes is still a bit of a bind for a lot of this team. I don't see anything that's actually immune to Spikes. I don't see a Levitator anywhere, so that's definitely something to keep in very close mind. There is Magic Guard, I guess, on LGM, but I think LGM probably more likely wants to run Regenerator in this format, so that could definitely be a bind. Mm-hmm. But yeah, unfortunate the Sun Synergy is not allowed. Chlorophyll got banned largely because of Bellsprout, not because of Bulbasaur, but still an interesting thing to happen. But yeah, I think there's some okay options. I still think Dreepy is a bit of a below average dragon. It doesn't actually get that great a move pool in general. For a dragon, it's surprisingly not very versatile. He's an okay spin blocker, though, I guess, and that's pretty much what he would want it for. But you still have anything on this one?
That's, yeah, you pretty much encapsulated it.
Alright then, so coming in at rank number 7 is going to be Gandhi. Now, when I look at this team originally, I see a very powerful Firewater Grass in Scorbunny, Cottony, Chinchou. I kind of like it, but then I start seeing more water types in Shellos. I see another electric type in Joltik, and you kind of see where I'm going here. I'm kind of seeing a lot of things that are a little questionable. There's double psychics on Baltoy Mom Jr. as well. There's quite a few like duplicating types coming on here. But saying that though, offensively this team actually can be very, very potent. Scorbunny hits really hard. Cottony, if its specs, can actually do a lot of work. Even just like simple sash sets with offensive pressure can do a lot. I can't actually remember. I don't think Joltik actually gets Sticky Web. I know Galvantula does, but I don't think Joltik does. That's something I can never remember if it does or not. Scurrypie's an interesting one. Again, double bug type though. So there's a lot of duplicating types going on here. But I think offensively this team can be very potent. Bagon is a pretty annoying setup mon if it can get going, but we'll have to see if it gets going. Bartleby, I don't remember if that gets huge power. I know Digger's does. But Bartleby does get huge power, so that's definitely something to bear in mind. But there's a lot of things to work with on this team.
Shellos, basically, he's last season's winner. And Shellos carried him through the last 2 finals. It's such a defensive tank. It's most of his defensive core, though. Outside of it, it feels like he dies to a solidly placed Earthquake. Yeah,
for sure, and that's one of the biggest issues that he's got to deal with. Be interesting to see how he does deal with that, and if he does deal with that, and where any issues could arise. But obviously, he comes back as a returning champion, so he must know what he's doing. It's as simple as that. Alright.
Or the rest of us don't.
Or the rest of us don't, but I'm going to be more optimistic and say he knows what he's doing. Right. Coming in at number 6 then is going to be Epsilon. Why don't you take this one, Goose?
Epsilon, yeah, he has one of the stronger Firewater Grass cores in the entire draft. Tortuga, Larvesta, and Fungus, absolutely fantastic. Larvesta got that buff with heavy-duty boots, so it's no longer getting chipped in half by a Stealth Rock. And Tortuga is a really nice bring back from Tundra. I almost called it Olive Armor. And it gets that Shell Smash, Sturdy, and Berry Juice combo that means it's a very, very potent sweeper. Stunky is some nice... does Stunky get defog? I know its evolution gets defog.
I think so. I'm just gonna check. I think that was why I wanted to pick it up originally. I'm just gonna check. I obviously know Skuntank gets it. Unless I'm not seeing it, it doesn't get it, so...
That's unfortunate, because I mean, his removal is pretty rough. I mean, he's got Trubbish can absorb Toxic Spikes, which is... And Trubbish itself is a fantastic setter of hazards.
Yeah, no, it doesn't
I'm not seeing a spin blocker here, which he seems like he's going to want to set up a lot of hazards with that Trubbish. So lacking a spin blocker seems unfortunate. And Hippopotas on this team feels really off. Although it's nice with Tortuga, Larvesta really does not want to take sand damage, and neither does Fungus. And neither does Trubbish or Stunky. It just doesn't really fit.
Yeah, it feels like a bit of anti-synergy there. Yes, there's Rock and Roller, and yes, there's Clank that doesn't care, and neither does Tortuga, but honestly, it's one of those where it feels like it's a rock setter plus to annoy a lot of Sturdy Mons, but a lot of Sturdy Mons are rock type, so that can definitely cause an issue. I don't know if Hippopotas is the best role on this team, but his top end is certainly pretty decent, so that's something to watch out for when you're playing him. But alright, now we're into the top 5, and this is where it kind of got difficult for Goose and I to look at this, because there was a lot of strengths and weaknesses on all of these teams. But coming in at number 5 is going to be Not Shady Kid, who's the only player I know from a previous league. But as much as I wanted to rank him lower because he has Why Not on his team and I despise Wobbuffet, unfortunately his team is actually semi-decent. He's got a very potent Fire Water Grass, Squirtle being very underrated. In fact, it's actually allowed Shell Smash in this league, unlike Sinistine. That's something to bear in mind. Anorith is an okay spinner as well. Not the best, but it's a decent spinner. It also gets hazards in its own right. Porygon, he was very hyped to get. I'm not as big a fan of Porygon as he is, but he obviously knows it a little better than I do. So I'm gonna let that one slide. But I do think this team is pretty good offensively. Execute may not be the best grass type in the world, but it can still be somewhat decent. Unfortunately, it's no longer allowed Chlorophyll, so that's something to bear in mind. But yeah, it does pair up somewhat okay with the rest of his team. So I'm interested to see how well he uses this. Obviously, trapping being allowed makes why not somewhat relevant. Other than that, it's kind of useless, but we'll see how it goes. But the other thing to point out is his poison type is not grounded unless he is not running Levitate on his coughing. So that could be another thing to catch him off guard. He could be a little bit weak to Toxic Spikes, but we'll have to see.
It should be mentioned that we did have a 2 of an item clause for this draft. Yeah. Which does weaken Porygon a bit, because Porygon doesn't function without an Eviolite.
Yeah, it could limit him, but we'll have to see. Yeah. Because there are still things like Berry Juice Mons and stuff like that available. So we'll see if he can actually use it. The item clause is definitely gonna scupper a lot of drafts, I think.
Credit to Nougat Boy for the item clause.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice clause to have. I kind of like it. Alright. But here we go, the top 4. We actually disagreed a little bit after this one, but we both agreed that Baconator is 4th. Goose, take that one away.
Baconator was one that right off the bat, when we were looking at all 14 teams, I thought might be number 1. Its Fire, Water, Grass core is really solid. Ponyta, Frillish, and Gossifleur. Many people don't know Gossifleur. It gets Regenerator, so it's fine. But then you look at it, it's got the double grounds in Onix and Golett, and the double rocks in Bonsly and Onix. And Qfant doesn't have a lot of synergy. I know you mentioned when we were talking it. Mana and Swablu are okay, not anything spectacular. I do like Tentacool and Farfetch'd G. Farfetch'd G was actually the first new Pokemon I used in Gen 8, and it was absolutely fantastic with the Choice Scarf. And then you look down and he's got a Cosmog on his team for some reason. I mean, just the pure fact that he is playing with 11 Pokemon. And I think that's the only reason we put him at number 4. And it's at least one of the main reasons, I think you would agree.
Yeah, and it's like, his removal is somewhat lacking as well. Like, Swablu's a defogger, yes, but where else is his removal coming from? Like, it's not a lot, right? So he could be hazard stacked on relatively easy, because I don't see Swablu coming to a lot of games. I don't think it's that great a Pokemon in general, and on this team, it doesn't entirely fit. So that's something that I think can be an issue. I think there's a lot of top end here that's very, very scary. Ponyta, if it gets off a Flame Charge, can murder anything in this format. It's terrifyingly good. Frillish is the baby form of one of my favorite bulky waters. I like Jellicent a lot. Shout out to my friend Exostomp, because he and I end up sniping it off each other every time we draft together. So that's something to bear in mind. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting team. I think it's got a lot of good options, but why the hell did you pick Cosmog? For God's sake, there's Binacle sitting there that gets Shell Smash. But nope, he wants the Cosmog, and he has promised. He posted it in the Discord that he promises Cosmog's coming to a game. So I want to see it. It's going to do nothing, but I want to see it. Use it against me, please.
I don't see it in the playoffs. I will. If I don't see it in the playoffs, I'm suing him.
Oh, no. We can't say that. Actually, we can. It's my video. I'll say what I want. Right. But coming in at rank number 3 is actually going to be Goose himself. I'll let you talk about your team, because I'm interested to hear your thoughts, and I'll talk about mine.
Okay, so I was really happy with how my draft went. It doesn't have a whole lot of useless Pokemon that you see in a lot of, shall I say, Cosmogs. I said earlier I picked up Vullaby 13th pick, which is absolutely astonishing, and I still don't understand how that happened. And then I immediately picked up Elekid, who is one of probably my favorite new Pokemon from the Crown Tundra. It and Diglett are the only 95 speed tiers, which means they get, with Jolly max speed, they get to 20 speed, which is untouchable outside of Scarf, which is just fantastic because its special attack is fine. It gets Volt Switch. It has all of the elemental punches, cross chop. It has a great mixed moveset. Litten is my personal favorite Pokemon in the tier. Intimidate, Parting Shot, Will-O-Wisp, just to make every physical attacker cringe. Lickitung gives some nice defensive backbone. The real weakness here is definitely the lack of a Fire, Water, Grass core or a Dark Fighting Psychic core. I have a Fighting type in Riolu, and that's it. So I
mean,
can't.
Blipbug is a Psychic type, technically, if I remember right, but it's garbage. Unless it got Psychic when it became Dottler, I'm not entirely sure.
I'm pretty sure it's just Bug. And it gets 5 moves, so that's kind of non-potent, but I do have Vullaby. The issue is I don't have a Psychic type. Don't have a Psychic type, and I really am lacking a defensive Grass type. My defensive backbone is mostly Lickitung, and maybe Honedge and Barboach, arguably. I was trying to set up a little bit of a rain thing here. Riolu is one of the better rain setters because it gets Prankster and just being a solid fighting type. Elekid gets to spam Thunder pretty nicely. Hoot was one in the debacle of the Tyrant trade. One of the things I did to try and support Mr. Thief was screw him out of his Blipbug and Hoot by trading away a Zubat and a Cubchoo that I was never going to use. Hoot can spam Hurricane and Rain, which was the main reason I picked it up. And Blipbug gets Sticky Webs and a bunch of really diabolical moves on that 5-move set. I think it's Recover, Struggle Bug, Infestation, and Supersonic alongside Sticky Web, which just sounds like a good time. I have Trapinch, which is a solid Trapper, and Vullaby obviously has Defog. It's pretty solid all around, but it's just missing those cores.
Yeah, and the cores is the only thing that I do see as a problem, but Vullaby has actually got okay bulk as well. It's not exactly frail. It's not the bulkiest thing in the world, but it's not exactly frail. I do think there's a lot of decent pivoting options. I think Vullaby also gets U-turn. Elekid is Volt Switch, Litten is U-turn. Also gets Fake Out priority, which is always nice. Something else to bear in mind, just gotta watch out for Vullaby's weak armor. But you don't have to, because Vullaby's on your team, so you're kinda okay. Something that's kind of underrated, I like Alolan Diglett a lot. That's a pick I was debating on picking up before I picked up Alolan Sandshrew in the end. But I think, honestly, I think this team can be very aggressive, and that is something that I think a lot of people have got to watch out for. The Pseudo Rain Core is interesting, especially working with Omanyte. Lord Helix with the Swift Swim. Let's go. But yeah, it's interesting. You're kind of specially frail. Something that I'm noticing a lot is your mons don't have the best special defense in the world, especially Honedge. Honedge's special defense is made of paper, so it's going to be interesting to see how well people play around you, especially offensive-wise. That's something to look out for, but it'll be really interesting to see how you play it. But it is going to be how you play it, I think. The core's lacking, does kind of suck, but you've got decent removal. You've got some good hazards as well, so I think your team is pretty okay, well-rounded, but the 2 teams above you are just that one little bit better. And speaking of that one little bit better, coming in at number 2 is going to be Chicken. Chicken has some very, very good classic mons in the format. Mienfoo, obviously, one of the best fighting types, if not the best fighting type in the format. Joba's a pretty solid ground type, it's a good spinner. Actually got a nice buff this generation thanks to the rapid spin buff. Also gets rocks as well. There's a bit of a pseudos hail core with the Almara and the Cubchoo, which was one of the benefits of the Thief Yi Tyrant exhibition trade, which actually is not too bad at all. Sandshrew in tier 5 is somewhat underrated, but it is a secondary ground type. But it is a rocks plus spinner, which isn't too bad. We have Critney Spears the Pidove, which Goose despises, but I think it's kind of fun. It's a decent enough defogger with heavy duty boots, but it doesn't do much else. The biggest issue with this team, which is why it wasn't ranked number 1, is the Popplio. Goose is not a huge fan of Popplio. I don't hate it. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. but it is kind of the letdown. When you see Charmander and Pumpkaboo there, which are both pretty solid, especially tier 3 picks for Fire and Grass, and then you just see Poplio sitting in tier 4 as your water, you kind of feel like I would have liked to have seen a better water on this team. But the thing is, like, the better waters that were left were all in tier 1, if I remember right. I think it was Shouder and Marini that were left. Obviously, you probably want Mienfoo over those two, gonna be honest. But, yeah, I do think this team has potential, though.
He does have a tier 1 free agent. Zigzagoon is a tier 1 with the Belly Drum Extreme Speed. I wonder if he should have he should have dropped Zigzagoon for Marini. Would have been an interesting idea.
Possibly, but I do kind of like the Belly Drum speed on Ziggy, though.
I do know that he was trying to pick up Grookey first pick. He was second pick in the draft.
Going hard in the grace period. He really wanted it. He was even trying to tell me that I should drop my Wingull and various other things like that. There's probably better waters you can get. He really went for it. He really wanted it. But I said to him at the time, look, there's nothing on the team that really gives me equal value here. Like, I'm trading down on every possible way to get this Grookey. So that was kind of the downside. Because the thing is, I would have been against taking Mienfoo. Like, I've used Mienfoo a lot. It's a mon I know very well. But it's just one of those where I wanted to try some new stuff. So if I did take Mienfoo, I'd have to get a lot of value out of it. And unfortunately, I couldn't. But it was kind of a bit funny, because apparently I sniped Chicken twice majorly. I took Grookey pick 1, and then I took Helioptile later. So, yeah, the poor guy got sniped a little bit, hence the joke in the Discord where I changed my name to Rabombi Sniper. Because I pretty much nicked half of Chicken's mons. But it's kind of funny. But there's obviously no hard feelings or whatever. That's just how drafting works. You don't always get what you want. It's just unfortunate that your first pick plan got scuppered by the one guy that had to pick before you. Which... I've been there. I think we've both been there ourselves. Definitely been there. I know how it feels, but it is what it is. But speaking of rank 1... Yes, I know. Some of you are going to call me biased. I put myself at rank 1. But I didn't just put myself here. Goose also put me here as well. So...
I will admit, I did also put him there. This is not the Illuminati and Rabombi working together to finagle the truth.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the obvious things is fair to say on there. I think I have the best Firewater Grass in the draft with Grookey, Torchic, and Wingull. They pair up really nicely together. There's such good synergy there. And then looking alongside it, I kind of drafted a lot of antis against a lot of the big threats in the format. I would sit here all day and give you a full breakdown, but guess what? I already did a draft breakdown. I'll make sure I have that down below, so you guys can watch it if you've missed it. But I talked for like 20 minutes in depth about this team and what I like about it. But looking at this team, I have a lot of good anti-answers, right? Helioptile can beat a lot of weather teams, which is always nice to have access to. Impidim's probably the only good fairy that I like outside of Spritzy in the format. Impidim's kind of nice. It's a prankster one. Interestingly, does get Rain Dance, so I can operate with Helioptile and Wingull with that regard, so that's something to bear in mind. I've got a couple of good speed boosters in Vanipede and Torchic. My team is actually blisteringly fast. Something that is kind of noticeable is I have some of the faster ones to work with. I think the only pick in this that doesn't really have much of a use on this team is Rookity, which is something I did try to trade away for Sinisty, but unfortunately we couldn't find a way to make the trade work with J-Plane. But Rookity is still an okay mon. It's a pure flying type, which means it's not entirely weak to Mienfoo. Obviously I know Mienfoo gets the elemental punches, but still. It's an option at the very least. But I have a lot of options for a lot of different mons, and I can answer pretty much every one of the tier 1 picks in the format with this team. And I think that's probably the scariest thing about it.
And the scariest thing about it is that you stole my mascot. Which was entirely
Chinchou and Magnemite! I'm sorry, I needed it, alright?
How can I be the Wicked Whoopers without a Whooper? This is not how things work.
How can I be the Royal Born for Rabombies and I don't even have a Rabombi in this draft? In fact, I barely even draft Rabombi in standard draft because every other fucker snipes it from me, so...
Hey, I mean, that's what you get. I guess that's mascot syndrome. Everyone knows to snipe it nice and fast.
Exactly. People hate me having Rabombi. Like, people are legit terrified of me having a Rabombi team. And I'm glad, because it does make it more fun when I get to use it. But, yeah. Like, no joke, though, this team has a lot of synergies, and I think that's what makes this team scary. But I'm looking forward to using it. The one downside to this team, though, it is skill-intensive, and I am somewhat rusty on Little Cup. I mentioned this in my draft breakdown. I haven't played a lot of Little Cup since Gen 7. I've played, like, a couple of Gen 8 tournaments here and there, but nothing of, like, any reasonable standard, so I'm a little rusty, and that might hold me back. But that being said, though, I'm a pretty decent mechanical player, so we'll see how well this team goes. But that is going to be it for the power rankings. I'm definitely looking forward to these Week 1 matches. There's some real spicy ones coming up. I can't wait to see how that goes. But either way, guys, that is going to be all from the power rankings. So as always, thank you so much for watching. My name is Rybombi Teacher. That's the Big Goose.
I am the Big Goose.
Stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.